Joining me now to talk more about the Occupy Albany protest is Albany County District Attorney David Soares. DA, thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just go through a little bit, because it's become slightly muddy, how this happened over the weekend, that you had a conversation with law enforcement that you would not prosecute folks who were arrested if, in fact, they were. Mm-hmm. So how did that come to be?
Well, there was a lot of dialogue going on between myself and local law enforcement as to the strategy that we would employ given the expectation that this was going to be a very large protest and, quite frankly, a much more extended protest than what we're accustomed to seeing here in the Capitol. And the thought was there could be provocation if we decided to preemptively strike, and we felt at that time that it would be in the best interest of public safety if we were to reach out to organizers and begin that dialogue and to see if we could engage in peaceful coexistence where the protesters would be exercising their First Amendment rights and law enforcement can go about the business of law enforcement, which is pursuing violent criminals and things and people of that nature.
Part of the problem here is that there's a history of protest in Albany that goes back a long way. In part that there are people at the Capitol who want to get arrested. They do it on purpose, right? That's a purview of the state police inside the Capitol. But I'm thinking of, for example, homeless advocates who spend the night in Townsend Park to raise money and awareness about the plight of the homeless, for example. And then the Amadou Diallo trial, which I think predated you, didn't it?
It did.
But Jerry Jennings, the mayor, was in fact in office, and there were folks here, lots of folks, more than are here now, and they protested, and the Reverend Sharpton was here, and he protested too. So you would be going back on what the precedent had already been. Is that not right?
There's been precedent, and quite frankly, with different protests, I think you employ different strategies, and for this particular protest and seeing what was occurring throughout the state and also throughout the country, quite frankly, we felt that this was the best strategy to employ, and it's working thus far.
Well, provocation, what does that mean? That you were afraid that people get violent, or that more people would come?
Well, if we, you take into consideration exactly where we are situated. Here, you're at the Capitol. We have colleges and universities all within 5 to 10 miles of one another, right. And the thinking was, if we go into the area and begin arrests, and media would capture the image of the senior citizen being pulled or the youth being pulled out, and I think that would have drawn more people to the protest.
And not just the media, right, but the protesters themselves, probably with cameras that would be on YouTube and Twitter in 2 seconds. It would probably, because that's what this movement has made use of social media in that way, and then you might get people from New York City who are coming up, or from Boston, or from Syracuse, or from wherever they might be.
Exactly, and I think we're seeing the use of that media right now throughout the country, throughout the world, and what it can do, and I think the fear on the part of law enforcement was, we don't want to create a situation, preemptively here, create a situation that we will not be able to handle in the long run. And there were efforts to reach out to the organizers. We've established great dialogue with the organizers, and I think these are folks that are engaging in a peaceful protest.
Well, how do you do that with a movement that has no leader?
Well, they do have attorneys in town that protesters will rely upon. The ACLU, Attorney Mark Mishler, who is accustomed to representing protesters in Albany City Courts, and he just happened to also be involved in this movement, and so it's nice to have had that relationship as well.
How much of this and at all figures into your personal ideology? I mean, you come from the left. You don't have you were elected on the Working Families Party line, if I remember correctly. You don't have the opportunity, obviously, to have your politics get involved in court. I mean, that's pretty cut and dried. You're either guilty or you're not. You prosecute a person, you build a case, etc. It has nothing to do with the millionaire's tax or Wall Street or anything. Was that a consideration for you at all?
It's no consideration. This is a public safety issue, and as far as I'm concerned, had we had different leadership, I think, in that particular police department going back several years, I think this would be an entirely different, the events would be entirely different. I think it would be a greater mess right now, but the progressive thinking leadership at the local police department right now, I think, had a lot to do with what we're seeing right now. And as far as my politics, it's always interesting for me to hear people tell me where I'm coming from.
Well, I just remember that you were elected on the with Working Families Party support, and they are supporting this movement, correct?
Mm-hmm. They are.
And they are a labor organization supported party. That we're talking about unions, for example. And so I'm not saying I assumed that you supported Occupy Wall Street. I'm just saying you came at one point in time from the left.
Sure. I believe that my candidacy was launched from the left. My father was a union guy and a labor guy. I remain supportive of labor, but my political ideology had nothing to do with my decision. My decision was entirely based upon not sparking a fuse that we would later regret, and it was purely a public safety issue.
The part where it gets a little muddy is how, for example, there have been reports that the Cuomo administration was very interested in shutting this down. Did the Cuomo administration, anybody from the Cuomo administration, talk to you at all?
No, there was no one from I mean, I'm doing a lot of the reading as well, and there's no one from the administration that reached out to me personally and made any specific requests or provided any sort of guidance as to their view of what was going to occur.
And what about the mayor? Because it seems there have been some reports or intimations that the police department acted a little bit independently of City Hall.
I think there was a lot of discussion that was going on throughout the day. No one really knew what to expect. I think the perspective that people had was based upon what we were seeing on television as to what this Occupy movement was doing in other locales. I think there was a lot of concern about that happening here. But I think in every one of those locations, I think when you have conflict, I think where things have gone wrong is, in fact, no communication going on between leadership of the movement as well as law enforcement. And I do believe that there is room here for peaceful coexistence.
So to that end, for example, the Manhattan DA, I believe, has said that there are 300 folks that he would not drop the charges against. Now, I think that they have had at this point some kind of an agreement that they would have desk appearance tickets, but that's not nothing. That's not just, okay, we've arrested you on the Brooklyn Bridge, now go free. There have been a lot of clashes in New York City, some of which have been violent, the use of pepper spray, but on the flip side, you've seen bad behavior by protesters. Defecating on a police car, I think, was an image that really sticks with people, and some other things. But generally speaking, in New York City, do you believe that that's been handled correctly? It's much larger, obviously.
It's certainly much larger, and they're dealing with entirely different circumstances there. You know, for us, what we stated from the very beginning was, look, so long as we don't have any property damage and we don't have people, causing injury to law enforcement, this is going to be our posture.
Going forward in perpetuity, as long as this folks stay?
And going forward, so long as they stay. Quite frankly, they're not doing any harm to anyone. I don't believe that there's been any damage to the parks. The people are peaceful. There's, senior citizens at this protest. There are children at this protest. I just don't see the need to engage the protesters, especially when there's been no hostility demonstrated whatsoever.
And they're on the city-owned piece of the property, right? I mean,
Yes.
This is a strange kind of a property because it's actually split in the middle, that Lafayette Park is state-owned and the state police have jurisdiction there, and then Academy Park, which is closer to City Hall, I believe, that's where the city has its jurisdiction, and they are now sort of in the haven, thanks to yourself and Mayor Jennings, of this particular area. Going back to the administration, I mean, it seems, according to reports, and we've not had them confirmed, but we've also not had them denied by the administration, that the governor was interested in making this go away, and they've now targeted him, calling it Cuomoville, or targeting him for his refusal to extend the millionaire's tax. Do you agree with his desire to shut this down? Do you think it could be a bad PR move?
I don't weigh into the public relations or the politics of the governor, and I'm not seeing this from a political prism. What I'm seeing this through is through the eyes of public safety. And I know, in my experience working in Albany County, with the volume of protesters that we see from time to time, if they come in and they engage in their protests, they have their say, and they felt like they've been heard, they generally will pack up, leave the place clean, and they will leave. It's not up to me to tell the protesters how long they should stay and what their discussion should be about.
It's very cold, actually.
It is cold, but to me, so long as people are exercising their First Amendment right, and they're doing so without calamity and without injury, without damage to property. To me, it's a wonderful thing to see, quite frankly.
Before I let you go, and just curious, because you are a fellow Democrat of the governor, and the governor, you share party affiliation. You also have had you've had a history with the governor. The two of you have collaborated and not collaborated. What is your current relationship with him? Do you speak to him frequently? He's right up the hill.
Well, I have not spoken to our governor in quite some time, but I do believe we have a very good working relationship, and it's a relationship we've shared throughout an extended period of time, and I think he's done a fantastic job bringing stability back to state government. And I wish him the best in his administration, and that's pretty much the relationship.
Because it is your jurisdiction when there's a criminal act that occurs in the legislature or that occurs in the Capitol, that's your problem.
Well, it's really the problem of the person who's engaging in the behavior, but
Indeed.
It is an issue that we will address in the county government, yes.
And is that something that you intend to focus on more significantly? And I know that there's a lot of crime going on, that you have to focus on a wide variety of crime. Is white-collar crime of the political nature something that you'll be focusing on?
Public integrity cases, white-collar crime, as well as your street and urban crime are things that are, our priority within the office, and we have a history of doing so and have a wonderful record of doing it.
A very large portfolio, not at this point including protest cases. I want to thank you not yet, and I want to thank you very much, DA Soares. It's really good to see you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.